What's up, guys? This is Alex Christoforou from the Duran. I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. And today we'll be taking a look at Trump's reaction to Khashoggi's possible murder. Right, Alexander, we saw a 60-minute interview with Donald Trump, and he sounded off on the Jamal Khashoggi incident. We still don't know if he was murdered. All signs are pointing to that, especially since Turkey announced that it had bugged the embassy. They say they have CCTV footage. They've tracked the 15 Saudis that entered the country. It seems to me that it might be checkmate Erdogan. MBS, the Saudi prince, does not look like he's in a position of strength. And in the 60-minute interview, Trump said, and I quote, that Saudi will suffer if indeed they murdered Khashoggi. What are your thoughts on Trump's comments, that 60-minute interview, and on Erdogan, the leverage that he may possibly have over Saudi Arabia? The floor is yours, Alexander.
Right. Well, let's first of all go back to our first program about this, because if you remember, we were speculating about whether or not Khashoggi was dead. And I said I thought it was more likely than not that he wasn't. And we were getting all these statements coming out of Turkey. And we were both wondering whether, in fact, these were based on fact or whether the Turks were just making it all up. And I said, on balance, I thought it probably was based on fact, and that they did have information from inside the consulate, which made them so able to say that Khashoggi was killed. And it seems that they did. It seems that they had managed to bug the consulate and presumably hack the internal CCTV. So it seems that they got film of it, and they actually got radio, or at least recordings of the murder. And apparently pretty gruesome it is. There's even apparently a bone saw that has been identified, which was used to chop his body up. And what's looking really bad about this is that there's information that some of these people who were in the hit squad that killed Khashoggi, at least, assuming he was killed, some of them seem to be associated with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's bodyguard. So they're people very close to him. And worst of all, there's rumors now that there's radio intercepts that the US has obtained, in which people who are within the Saudi system apparently discuss Khashoggi's murder or abduction before it happened. And there's a theory now that the intention was that he would indeed be abducted and taken to Saudi Arabia, but that he was somehow killed instead, and that the US was somehow told in advance that he would be abducted and had sort of said okay about that, but that they were very shocked when he was actually killed. So it's beginning to look as if the evidence, we haven't actually seen this evidence, but apparently a lot of people have seen this evidence, and it is looking conclusive. And I think this is putting Donald Trump in something of a spot, because he has built up relations with Saudi Arabia. He's staked an awful lot on the US's relationship with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Faisal. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has been very close to Mohammed bin Faisal. They apparently, on one occasion, spoke for a whole day together and went on talking until 4 o'clock in the morning about this, that, and the other. I mean, it was, very close friendship. And now I think Donald Trump has discovered that, Mohammed bin Faisal is not the sort of person that he expected, and is in fact somebody who it seems is prepared to order people like Khashoggi killed, and killed in a very gruesome way. And I think Donald Trump is both very embarrassed and very angry. And I think this isn't the sort of thing that you do to Donald Trump. I think he's the kind of person who takes these things very personally. And I was watching his comments, and I got the impression that he was really angry. So, given that I think the information that Khashoggi was killed is overwhelming, and I'm sure he has been killed, I suspect that we will see a reaction from the Trump administration very soon. How extensive that will be remains to be seen.
And I think, is there a correction, Alexander? You said bin Faisal. I think you meant bin Salman.
Bin Salman. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. I meant, you're quite right. Mohammed bin Salman.
Right. And, okay. Going to bin Salman, I mean, just 4 months ago, he was praised by MSNBC, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post as the reformer prince. You know, he opened up movie theaters for women to go to. He allowed women to drive, and everyone was just praising bin Salman. I mean, he was the man that was going to bring Saudi Arabia into the 21st century, the liberal prince. They were praising this guy. This guy is a sociopath. That was my take on it. I've written a lot of articles on this guy. This guy's a nutcase. He's a nut job. Anyway, that's my opinion on this guy. I think the U.S. is now realizing it. Trump is realizing it. Kushner's realizing it. Erdogan probably knew it already. Maybe it takes one to know one. But in this case, there was a Moon of Alabama article, I believe it was Moon of Alabama, which said that now that Erdogan has this information that, you know, Khashoggi was brutally murdered by 15 guys, that Trump knows that Khashoggi was murdered. I'm sure Turkey must have shared that information with the U.S. These guys, speaking about Trump and Erdogan, they're going to use this as leverage over Saudi Arabia, either for a massive arms deal that the U.S. seems to have tied up, a massive arms deal in which they're going to tell Saudi Arabia, buy more, or you're going to buy these arms at this incredible amount of money, I think 100 billion, 200 billion, whatever it is. And that Erdogan's going to ask for his price as well. What do you make of that line of thinking?
Right. First of all, about him, Mohammed bin Salman being a sociopath, you're absolutely right. Now, can I just say, neither of us was fooled about this, and I would invite our listeners, our viewers, to go to the Duran, dial in the Duran, Mohammed bin Salman, Christoforou, Mercouris, and see what we've been writing about him. I mean, we weren't taken in by this guy, not for 1 millisecond. In fact, I can remember writing somewhere that his genius would be to destroy Saudi Arabia at supersonic speed if he remained in power, given the kind of person he was. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the credulity of people like MSNBC and the others. I mean, there was a bizarre piece I think it was the New York Times by Thomas Friedman saying, you know, this great, amazing reformer. I mean, you know, it was surreal. It was weird. But as you correctly said, it's all now coming apart. People are seeing him for what he is. He had this extraordinary economics conference that he was going to have in Saudi Arabia now. All the sort of people that he was inviting are failing to go. Richard Branson, the British entrepreneur, various US companies, they're all turning their invitations down or giving excuses for not going. So the wheels are coming off the bin Salman bandwagon, and so they should. So they absolutely should. And you're absolutely right. Erdogan, probably because he is in the Middle East, and probably because he shares some of these Napoleonic complexes that bin Salman has, also saw through him very quickly. They are enemies and rivals. And I suspect what will now happen is that people in the US and Turkey will be saying to the Saudis, look, we are prepared to keep a relationship with Saudi Arabia going because Saudi Arabia is so important, and you're a major oil producer, and you are responsible for security in the Gulf region. But firstly, bin Salman has to be marginalized. It's debatable whether he can actually become king now. And the second thing is, you've got to pay, and you've got to pay an awful lot. You've got to pay an awful lot to Turkey to keep Erdogan's bubble going, because of course that's what he's been running in Turkey for an awful long time. He was able to squeeze $15 billion out of Qatar. God knows what kind of money he's going to be asking the Saudis to cough up with. And we're going to see the same thing coming from the US. I was actually talking to somebody from Iraq, by the way, just the other day, and he made exactly the same observation. He said this is all going to end up in a nice piece of extortion from the US and other countries. They'll be going along to Saudi Arabia and they'll be saying, look, we're prepared to look the other way, but, you've got to come up with an awful lot of money in arms deals, in all sorts of deals. And as I said, you've got to push this guy aside because he is a loose cannon and he cannot be allowed to behave like he has been because he's dangerous. And even if he doesn't involve us in wars, and of course he's already started a war in Yemen, even if he doesn't want to involve us in wars, his potential for causing us embarrassment, as he has just done over Khashoggi, is simply tremendous.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you 3 sets of questions so we could tie up this segment, Alexander. And the first question is, do you believe that MBS is done? He's finished now. The second question I was going to ask you is, do you believe the Yemen war may effectively be over because MBS was the guy that pushed that brutal war and the U.S. supported him as he pushed that brutal war because he is a sociopath? And what do you think about Iran? Maybe Iran can chalk this up as a small little victory against Saudi Arabia.
Right, let's take it. First of all, is he finished? Well, it depends how strong support for him in Saudi Arabia is. Now, this has always been something of an unknown because Saudi Arabia is such a complicated country and such a very mysterious country in some ways. One gets the sense that the king, his father, King Salman, that MBS is the apple of his father's eye and that this is why he was made a crown prince and all those things. But I have to say, every other indication suggests that most of the other Saudi princes have lots of doubts about him. Many of them actively hate him, and there's been a lot of trouble. I mean, a year ago, he was rounding up Saudi princes and locking them up in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh, and actually getting money out of them. I mean, it's an extraordinary piece of extortion that went on there. So, I cannot imagine that he doesn't have lots and lots of critics within Saudi Arabia. And I suspect what's now going to happen is that those people who, of course, have their friends in Washington are going to now be saying to their friends in Washington, look, this isn't really somebody that we can have as king in Saudi Arabia. The people in Washington will be saying the same thing. And we will probably see pressure on the king to actually push MBS aside. So, I mean, I think that his position in Saudi Arabia hangs by a thread, and it really depends on how strong the position of the king is. Kings in Saudi Arabia have been deposed in the past. The Saudi royal family can be very ruthless protecting its own interests. So Saudi kings can be removed. We'll see how far the king is prepared to stand by him and how strong the king's own position is. And I think there's a fair chance, a pretty strong chance, that we could see MBS out of the way very quickly. Now, what about other countries? What about Iran, first of all? I think that the Iranians will be watching. I don't think the Iranians have many friends in Saudi Arabia. But I think if he goes, they will be pleased because he is somebody who has taken such a hard line in relations with Iran and has been so active in promoting the confrontation that with Iran and has drawn the United States into it. That, as I said, if he's weakened, if his position in Saudi Arabia is weakened, or if he's removed, I think they will chalk it up as a victory. As for the war in Yemen, that is a total disaster. It is very difficult to see how Saudi Arabia can withdraw from it without a total loss of face. But again, the Saudis are tremendous survivors. It's not impossible that they will do exactly that and absorb the loss of face and say that it was all MBS's fault and blame it all on him. So I'm not sure that's going to happen. I wouldn't count on it, but it is possible. And if MBS goes, and if King Salman himself finds himself under pressure, well, I think all the bids are off. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see.
This story is really developing at a fast pace. Let's see where it goes.
Indeed. Can I just say one very last thing, which is, I think it's something which I would make, a point I would make, and that this Iraqi person that I was speaking to the other day made to me. He said, it took the murder of a man who, is very westernized, writes from the Washington Post, is based in the United States and is a US resident for, the, Western world, for the United States, to wake up to the fact that MBS was, as you rightly said, a sociopath. Lots and lots of other people have died in Saudi Arabia up to now. There's been this terrible war in Yemen. People have shown no interest in it. When one man dies, an articulate, Western educated, English speaking, sophisticated person, then that's what it needs apparently for the world to take notice. But there we are. Notice they have now finally taken, and we will see. As you said, this is going in all sorts of directions, and we will see where it ends.
Well said, Alexander. Well said. And the fact that Trump was so he took a very strong stance in the 60-minute interview, I think it says a lot.
Exactly.
Alex?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think he feels betrayed. I think he feels very angry and very betrayed. And Donald Trump does react very strongly to these things. I mean, he is somebody who, you shouldn't do these things to. I mean, he does respond to them. He's an emotional man, as he has repeatedly shown. And the idea that he doesn't care about human rights, I think is nonsense. I think he doesn't care about them in the abstract. But when it comes to individuals, he cares about them a lot.
I totally agree. I think Trump is not the type of man that, I think he's the type of man that once you win his loyalty, he's there for you. But once you cross him in the way that I think MBS has now done, all hell's going to break loose.
Exactly. That's my feeling also. That is exactly my feeling.
Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on the notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video, and visit the Duran shop. Buy a t-shirt, help support the Duran. And in the description box down below, you'll find links to our PayPal and Patreon pages. Please donate. Help us create videos like this for you. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you once again. Until next time, take care.